Maple Ridge Estates was the kind of neighborhood that looked like it had been plucked straight from a magazine cover. Perfectly trimmed hedges, identical mailboxes, driveways swept clean, and flower beds lined with bright, uniform blooms. On the surface, it was a picture of suburban perfection. But beneath the polished exterior, the neighborhood had a reputation built on the iron grip of the Homeowners Association president, Mr. Harold Collins. Mr. Collins was a man in his late 50s with a sharp jawline, slicked back hair, and a constant smirk that seemed carved into his face. He prided himself on being the protector of order. In reality, he ruled with an iron fist and a clipboard, relishing every opportunity to assert his power. Residents whispered about him behind closed doors, but in public, they nodded, smiled, and complied. Nobody dared to challenge him. To Collins, humiliating people was sport. He believed that shaming a resident in front of their neighbors was the best way to set an example. Whether it was a trash can left out a few minutes too long or grass growing an inch too high, Collins pounced at the chance to call people out publicly. It was his stage, and the neighborhood was his audience. One sunny Saturday morning, the calm rhythm of Maple Ridge shifted when a moving truck rolled into one of the houses on Oakwood Lane. From the cab stepped Sarah Thompson, a woman in her mid-30s. She was tall, with a quiet grace and an aura of discipline about her. Dressed simply in jeans and a fitted jacket, she greeted the movers with polite words and a small smile. Neighbors watched from their porches, whispering and speculating. Some admired her independence. Others wondered why she had chosen Maple Ridge, a place known less for community warmth and more for Collins' suffocating rules. Sarah's move was orderly, efficient. She carried boxes herself, working alongside the movers with a quiet strength that did not go unnoticed. But unlike most new residents who nervously sought Collins' approval, Sarah kept to herself. She didn't knock on his door, didn't introduce herself, didn't ask for guidance on the rule book. This, to Collins, was unacceptable. From across the street, Collins stood with his ever-present clipboard tucked under his arm, squinting at the scene. He didn't like what he saw. A new resident who hadn't come running to him for validation. A woman who carried herself with composure instead of anxious compliance. It gnawed at him. "She'll learn soon enough," he muttered under his breath, scribbling something onto his clipboard. For now, Sarah remained an enigma, polite, respectful, but reserved. The neighbors couldn't quite put their finger on it, but there was something about her presence, something calm yet commanding, that hinted she was not the type to be easily intimidated. Collins, however, was already plotting. He had made a career out of turning confident newcomers into obedient residents. In his mind, Sarah Thompson would be no different. He just needed the right opportunity to humiliate her, and when that chance came, he intended to take it in front of the entire neighborhood. A week after Sarah had moved in, the HOA called for its monthly neighborhood gathering. It was held in the cul-de-sac at the center of Maple Ridge Estates, where folding chairs were neatly ranged in rows, and a long table was set up for the board members. As always, Mr. Collins stood at the head, clipboard in hand, ready to deliver his lecture on rules and fines. The sun was bright, the air warm, and nearly every family had turned out. Attendance wasn't exactly voluntary. Collins had a way of ensuring everyone showed up, lest they be labeled non-compliant. Children played on the edges of the street while adults sat stiffly, waiting for the meeting to begin. Collins cleared his throat dramatically, tapping his clipboard for attention. "Welcome, residents, to another gathering where we uphold the pride of Maple Ridge Estates." His voice was loud, commanding, designed to remind everyone who held authority here. Sarah had taken a seat in the back row, her posture straight, hands folded neatly in her lap. She listened quietly, observing. The first 20 minutes passed in the usual fashion: announcements about lawn heights, parking regulations, and trash schedules. But then Colin's eyes landed on Sarah, and his smirk widened. The moment he had been waiting for had arrived. "Now, before we conclude," Colin said, raising his voice slightly, "we need to address her violation." He dramatically flipped through his clipboard papers, though it was clear he already knew the page. "Miss Thompson, our new resident." The crowd turned in unison, eyes landing on Sarah. She raised her head slightly but remained calm, her expression unreadable. Colin stepped away from the table, pacing toward her. "It seems your mailbox, though sturdy, is not painted in the approved H0A color. Additionally, I have observed on multiple occasions that your flag is not in the exact regulated position outlined in our handbook." Whispers rippled through the crowd. Some neighbors exchanged uneasy glances. These were small infractions, ones that most people would have received a quiet note about. But Collins was putting Sarah on display, turning her into a spectacle. And, Collins added, raising his voice so even those across the street could hear, "I must remind you that we are a community of order. You cannot simply do things your own way." Without regard for the rules that make this neighborhood what it is, he leaned forward slightly, his voice dripping with condescension. "You may think this is just a flag or just a mailbox, but here in Maple Ridge, it's about respect. Respect for rules. Respect for authority." The crowd shifted uncomfortably. Sarah remained still, her face composed, her gaze steady on Collins. She didn't flinch, didn't defend herself, didn't show a flicker of embarrassment. Her calmness only fueled his need to break her. "If you cannot follow the simplest of rules, Miss Thompson, perhaps this isn't the right neighborhood for you. Maybe Maple Ridge requires a stronger sense of discipline than you're accustomed to." Gasps spread through the group. A few neighbors lowered their heads, ashamed by his cruelty. Collins had crossed a line, but he thrived on these moments, on the silence that followed, the silence that confirmed no one dared oppose him. He straightened, smug, expecting Sarah to shrink, to apologize, to scramble for approval like so many before her. But Sarah simply tilted her head slightly, her voice low, and even when she finally spoke, "Are you finished, mister?" Collins, the quiet strength in her tone sent a ripple through the gathering. Her words weren't loud, but they carried weight. Collins froze for a split second, startled by the composure in her question. The crowd, too, sensed something had shifted, though none could yet grasp just how dramatically this confrontation would turn against him. The cul-de-sac seemed to hold its breath. Sarah's calm question, "Are you finished, mister?" Collins echoed like a challenge wrapped in velvet. Collins' smirk faltered, but only for a moment. He puffed out his chest, scanning the neighbors as if to remind them who stood in charge. "You don't get to decide when I am finished, Miss Thompson," he barked. "Here, I am the voice of order. And you," he jabbed a finger toward her, "are a guest in this community until you prove yourself worthy of it." A murmur rolled through the crowd. Some shifted uncomfortably, others frowned. The children had stopped playing, sensing the weight of the moment. Sarah rose slowly from her chair. She was not rushed, not flustered. Her movements were deliberate, measured, as if she were standing in formation again. The sun caught her posture, tall, straight-backed, commanding in its quiet dignity. "I see," she said softly. Her voice was calm, but each word struck with the precision of a hammer. "You believe respect is owed to you simply because you hold a title. You believe humiliating me in front of my neighbors proves your authority." Colin sneered, though his eyes darted nervously. "Respect is earned by following the rules, Miss Thompson, and you have failed." Sarah's gaze did not waver. Instead, she reached into her back pocket and unfolded a small, worn leather wallet. She opened it to reveal her military identification card. Gasps erupted. Round the circle, "I am Sergeant Sarah Thompson," she said, her tone even but laced with steel. "United States Army. I have served 12 years, including 3 tours overseas." I know the meaning of respect, Murdoch Collins. I have lived and bled alongside men and women who understand discipline, sacrifice, and honor. And I assure you, none of them would recognize it in what you are doing right now. The silence that followed was deafening. Collins' face drained of color. He opened his mouth, but no words came. His clipboard trembled in his hand. Round them, the neighbors leaned forward, their eyes wide. Some looked shocked, others relieved. One of the older residents, Mrs. Garcia, whispered just loud enough for the crowd to hear, "She's a soldier?" Sarah continued, her voice firm, no longer just addressing Collins, but everyone present. Respect is not demanded by shouting down your neighbors. It's not gained by humiliating someone in public over a mailbox. Respect is given when you treat others with dignity, whether they wear a uniform or not. Her words struck deeper than any fine Collins had ever issued. The crowd erupted into murmurs, this time not of fear, but of approval. Heads nodded. A few people even clapped softly, their courage reignited by Sarah's stand. Collins looked around desperately, but the shift in power was undeniable. The neighbors who once shrank under his scolding now looked at him with thinly veiled contempt. His authority, so carefully constructed on fear, was crumbling before his eyes. Sarah didn't gloat. She didn't raise her voice. She simply stood tall, her presence commanding more respect than Collins had ever managed to force. And in that moment, everyone saw the truth. The so-called enforcer of Maple Ridge had been put in his place, not by howling, but by the quiet strength of someone who had faced battles far greater than Hoafines. The air in the cul-de-sac had shifted. Neighbors leaned in, whispering, exchanging glances, their eyes fixed on Sarah as if seeing her for the first time. The power Collins once wielded through fear was slipping through his fingers like sand. Collins tried to recover, his voice trembling as he clutched his clipboard like a shield. This isn't about the army," he stammered, sweat forming at his temples. "This is about rules. Everyone here follows them, and you should be no exception." Sarah stepped forward, closing the gap between them. She did not tower over him, but her presence alone made him retreat half a step. "You speak of rules," she said, her voice sharp yet calm. "But what you practice is control. You humiliate, you intimidate, you belittle. That is not leadership. That is cowardice dressed in authority." Gasps rippled through the crowd. Sarah turned, sweeping her gaze across the neighbors. "How many of you have been fined, shamed, or threatened over things that could have been resolved with simple respect?" Hands slowly rose. Mrs. Garcia lifted hers, eyes narrowing at Collins. A young father raised his hand. A couple across the way raised both. Soon, more than half the crowd had responded. Murmurs grew into voices, hushed at first, then louder, emboldened by Sarah's presence. "She fined me for a flower pot. He made me repaint my fence twice. He told me I couldn't park in front of my own house." Colin's face turned red as the voices surrounded him, each one a stone striking the crumbling wall of his authority. He shouted over them desperately, "Silence! This is disorder. You will listen to me." But no one fell silent. Instead, all eyes turned back to Sarah. She raised her hand gently, and the crowd quieted almost instantly, not out of fear, but out of respect. That contrast spoke louder than any words. Sarah's gaze returned to Collins. "You see, they don't listen to you because they respect you. They listen because they fear your fines. That is not power, Murdoch Collins. That is weakness." Collins' voice cracked. "And what makes you think you know better?" Sarah reached into her folder and pulled out a neatly folded set of papers. She held them up, her voice ringing clear. "Because, unlike you, I understand responsibility. And because," she paused, letting the silence hang like a drumbeat, "this property you try so hard to control. It is mine, paid for, in full." The crowd erupted. Shock, whispers, even laughter rippled through the gathering. Colin's jaw dropped. His clipboard clattered to the ground. Sarah stepped closer, lowering her voice so that every word landed like thunder. You don't own me. You don't command me, and you will not humiliate me again. For the first time in years, Collins was speechless. He stood trembling, stripped of the full authority he had wrapped himself in. The neighbors, once cowed by his presence, now looked at him with open defiance. The balance of power had shifted completely, and there was no turning back. Sarah did not gloat. She simply straightened her papers, tucked them under her arm, and walked back to her seat. Her calm dignity, her quiet strength, spoke volumes louder than Collins' shouting ever had. And in that moment, everyone in Maple Ridge knew the self-appointed tyrant had been dethroned. The meeting sat in stunned silence. Collins, once so loud and domineering, stood pale and trembling with his clipboard lying forgotten at his feet. His authority, so long built on fear, had evaporated before everyone's eyes. Sarah, calm and collected, returned to her seat. She set her papers on her lap and folded her hands. Her posture strong but unthreatening. She didn't have to say another word. The neighborhood had already seen the truth. Then, quietly but firmly, Mrs. Garcia spoke up from the front row. I have lived here for 15 years, and I have never once felt respected by this H0A. Today, Sarah has shown us what real strength looks like. And it is in Collins' way. Nods and murmurs of agreement rippled through the crowd. Others spoke up. He fined me for a garden swing. He embarrassed my son for leaving his bike out. He treats us like children, not neighbors. The voices grew louder, united, until Collins raised his hands desperately. Enough, you can't just. This is my community to manage. Without rules, everything falls apart. But his voice cracked. No one was afraid anymore. Sarah rose again, not with anger, but with a calm authority that silenced the crowd more effectively than Collins ever had. She stepped forward and spoke evenly, her tone carrying the quiet weight of truth. Rules are important, she said, her eyes sweeping across the neighbors. But rules are not meant to humiliate. They are meant to serve people. Respect is not demanded with fines and threats. It is earned by treating others with dignity. She let her words hang in the air. The neighbors listened intently, leaning forward. In the army, she continued, I served with men and women who risk their lives every day. And do you know what held us together? Not fear, not fines, not shouting. It was respect. Mutual respect. That is real discipline. And that is what builds a true community. The crowd erupted in applause, genuine, relieved, hopeful. For the first time in years, they felt heard. Collins stumbled backward, humiliated, his face red with shame. He tried to speak, but the voices drowned him out. The neighbors were no longer under his spell. His reign was over. Mrs. Garcia stood and addressed the group. I think it's time we vote on new H0A leadership. Someone who actually represents us. Eyes turned to Sarah. She raised her hands gently. I didn't come here to take charge. I came here to live in peace, just like all of you. But if I can serve, not rule, serve this community, then I will. Cheers broke out. Neighbors clapped, smiled, even hugged one another. For the first time, Maple Ridge felt less like a prison of rules and more like a real neighborhood. Collins slipped quietly out of the circle, shoulders hunched. Defeated, no one followed him. No one defended him. His authority had collapsed under the weight of truth. Sarah remained, standing among her neighbors, the applause settling into something quieter, respect, genuine, lasting respect. As the sun dipped lower, casting long golden rays across the cul-de-sac, Sarah finally allowed herself a small smile. She had faced harder battles than this. But today, she had fought one that mattered just as deeply, not for land, not for medals, but for dignity, and Maple Ridge would never be the same again.